Hello. We're starting this one a little bit early today. I was just sitting here, kind of tooling around, and I'm like, I got 2 minutes. Let's just fire it up. Let's do it. What a weekend, bud. What a weekend. Today I think the absolute worst part is I made this video, and it was a very personal video for me. A childhood friend who I haven't spoken to in many, many years. I just found out that she committed suicide, along with the fact that my uncle passed away. He was only like 75, but his death wasn't unexpected, and so I got talking about it on the video, and some of the comments that have been coming my way for it are just absolutely gross. Just absolutely gross. Like inhuman. Not like trollish. Not people coming in and being a troll like I expect to see on this feed later on, but rather just like people who simply want to sidestep the fact that I'm going through a moment of grief. I'm speaking from my heart. They want to do that, like, well, actually, kind of talking to me, the kind of condescension speech. And I just don't have time for it. I just don't have time for it at all. Like, they obviously don't care about me as a human being. They obviously, especially this Kyle Rittenhouse situation. Like, people are seeming to miss the point that no one cares if what he did was within the confines of legality. Lots of things are legal or lots of things have happened that were legal. And we don't accept them. We simply don't accept them. Like, things like slavery, things like the Holocaust, these things happened, they were legal. The truth of the matter is that Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines, brought a weapon with him to a protest with the intention of using it, and did. And the real truth of it is that if he was not a white man, he wouldn't have made it to trial. That's very straightforward. I don't even think that needs to be... I think that if you're denying the reality of that situation, then you're too far gone. Like, you're too far gone. I don't know what can be said to a person who believes that, like, if Kyle Rittenhouse had have been black or Latino, right, he wouldn't have made it outside of that day. They would have lynched him immediately. It would have been very straightforward. And the police that did so would have gone through some kind of cursory kind of formality trial, and if there was a slap on the wrist for them. But I mean, we've already seen like what they're willing to do for a white citizen, right? And people like to make hay about, well, the protesters, they also had weapons. Okay. So if the protesters with the weapon, the people that Kyle Rittenhouse opened fired on, if they had have shot first, would it have been self-defense for them? This is where the conversation gets really chunky, and I don't think people actually understand exactly where this is going, right? That, like, if you have two sides that are armed looking at one another, you're saying the precedent is whoever shoots first can claim self-defense, right? And this is what the United States does on the world stage all the time, right? The United States invades, let's say, Iraq, right? Sets up military bases, sets up zones, and then they can shoot whoever they like and claim self-defense. And nobody is going like, you're not supposed to be there in the first place, right? Excuse me? Like, hey, hello? It's going to turn into a real mess down there, eh? Like, it's going to be a mess, I think, in Europe and in Canada to certain degrees, but it's going to be a real mess in the United States. Like, the big difference here in Canada and throughout Europe is that we have procedures to go get weapons, right? You can't just go to like a Kmart or a Walmart and buy a gun, right? You're just not allowed to. That's not how it rolls. And it's not like my freedom, oh my god, right? Like it's nothing like that. It's literally like we expect people to have a license or have a certain degree of training to be able to get behind the wheel of a vehicle or operate heavy machinery or operate all sorts of machinery, right? You can't just pick up a welding gun and start welding without a certificate, right? And yet when it comes to a gun, right, which is a piece of machinery, like, the United States seems to have bent over backwards to try to convince itself and everyone around it that it's perfectly acceptable that people can have these pieces of heavy machinery for nothing. You literally can just like walk into a Walmart, show them like any piece of identification, right? So that you're, of age. And even barely that. Like, even barely that. I remember there was this one kid who went around just to show how absurd all of this was, and he went in to buy some alcohol. He's 14. He goes into a place to buy some alcohol. They're like, "Can I see your license or whatever?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't have it. I'm only 14." And they're like, "Haha, I'm not going to sell you alcohol, haha." And then he like walks right down the street, walks into a gun shop, and he walks out with a shotgun. Like, that's a significant problem no matter how you slice it. I'm making it happen, Ruth. I'm making it happen. I really slept through Sunday. Sunday was a real depression sleep day. I think I slept like 20 hours on Sunday, like straight up. It was a day that the depression took me and it had me, and I let it. Very straightforwardly, I let it. How are you doing, Ruth? How are you doing? And this is a major problem in America. Like, this is an enormous problem. That the place is awash in guns. Not only is it awash in guns, because like Canada per capita, Canada and the United States are actually quite equal with one another in terms of gun ownership, right? That's always been the case. But the major difference is that like, you're not allowed to, in Canada, you're not allowed to walk around with a gun. Like, you're not allowed to like have a gun slung over your shoulder and walk around with it. And if you have like an open carry or a concealed carry, there is a lot of you've got to go through a lot to get to that point where that's something that's considered legal here in Canada. You don't just get to have a gun and walk around and just be like, "Hur, I've got a gun," right? Like, it's an absurdism. The idea that Kyle Rittenhouse was allowed to even walk the streets with this gun in the first place is, to me, and I think to the entire rest of the world, a complete absurdity. Like, you are living in a place that is lawless, that the laws are built to be lawless. Yeah, thank goodness Canadians aren't gun crazy like the USA. We just think differently. We do have like our gun nuts, but I just think that we took a more reasonable path. We just took a more reasonable path, We just said to the people around us, to the nations around us. Well, he actually had a recent interview. This is what's so interesting about this, right? Is that people have been, "Hey, Zorigan, thank you so much. Thanks for your love. I hope you're doing well too. I sincerely hope that you're doing well too." People have. Good to see you too, Nova Scotia. Good to see you too, bud. I feel like people forget that like we're people, like you guys are just like a line on a screen to me, and then I'm just like a digital image to you, and like. And I know that there are people commenting on my stuff who I think don't see me as like a person, as like a flesh and blood individual. And And it's all this digital shit, right? It's easy to forget. Like, I'm not an NPC, right? And neither are you. Hi, Major. How you doing today, bud? Hope you're doing well out there. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I mean, like, for goodness sakes, I have, well, as we go forth, right? Like, I mean, there are pictures coming out of him being venerated and worshipped in ways that can only be described as just hysterically delusional. However, he recently has an interview with Tucker Carlson where he actually says he supports the Black Lives Matter movement, right? And this, I think, has really thrown a wrench into the alt-right's sort of veneration of him, right? That they want him to be like an alt-right nut job like they are, right? Like they want him to be the hero who opened fire and all this kind of stuff. But like at the end of the day, he's just like a kid, you know? Like there is this element of it that the true shame of it is that he was allowed to put himself and to be put in that situation in the first place. Like that's the true shame of it, that like no one at any stage of authority whatsoever thought maybe it's a bad idea to let anyone walk the streets with an automatic rifle. Thanks, Ezial. I appreciate that. Good to see you too, BP. I don't know why you retracted that message, but you felt you had to, so. The billionaires are the only NPCs. How do we redistribute their abilities? And you know what? There's something really hilarious. Okay, before I move on, guys, let's do our due diligence, right? Let's do our due diligence, right? You got to pick a number between 1 and 10. You know, we've got to do homage to Mr. Lynch as he sends the energy into the world. The energy could be yours. So, oh yes, of course, BP. I don't know what the rules are for any of this.
Here we go for today's number.
Here we go.
It's November 22,
I'm gonna do 2.
2021.
Me and Harry. 2 buddies.
10 balls.
3.14's working. Come on.
Each ball has a number.
I'm going to say that's a 3.
Numbers 1 through 10.
He's not going to draw a pie ball, buddy.
Swirl the numbers.
Swirl the numbers. And he's wearing this hat. I love everything about this, man. With the shirt, with the like thing.
Pick a number.
Everything about this is majestic.
Today's number
On
is 2.
You know what's funny? I got the last number too. I hit the last number too. So I think that my depression must be a lightning rod for David Lynchian energy. I think that that's true. Congratulations to you too, Harry. You're in on this. I legitimately think that when I fall into a depression, it like opens up a portal, a psychic mind portal between me and David Lynch and whatever he's pulling, right? It's got to be the truth. It's got to be the truth, right? Like anytime I'm feeling down or blue, that's when the numbers start coming for me. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's just the truth. So Harry and I, we walk around with the blessings of Mr. Lynch. Yeah, depression is a catalyst. It's there's certainly something true to that. What the heck was I talking about? There was, it's a Guardian article. Yeah, yes. So this is something that I think is really worth thinking about. This is a pretty short article, so I'm going to read it. And then I'm going to talk about this because it's an interesting perspective that you don't see a lot, right? So this is from The Guardian. I'm a therapist to the super rich. They are as miserable as Succession makes out. Now, I'm not familiar with Succession, but this is a Netflix show, I believe. In any case, from Clay Cockrell. Many billionaires I work with have trust issues, lack a sense of purpose, and struggle with shame, guilt, and fear. If I had $1 for every time I've heard the term first world problems, my bank account would look similar to those of my clients. I work as a psychotherapist, and my specialism is ultra high net worth individuals. I got into working with billionaires by accident. I had one wealthy client who passed my name around to their acquaintances. They are called the 1% for a reason. There's not that many of them, and so the circle is tight. Over the years, I have developed a great deal of empathy for those who have far too much. The television program Succession, now in its third season, does such a good job of exploring kinds of toxic excess my clients struggle with that when my wife is watching it, I have to leave the room. It just feels like work. What could possibly be challenging about being a billionaire, you might ask? Well, what would it be like if you couldn't trust those close to you? Or if you looked at any new person in your life with deep suspicion? I hear this from my clients all the time. What do they want from me? Or how are they going to manipulate me? Or they are probably only friends with me because of my money. Then there are the struggles with purpose, the depression that sets in when you feel like you have no reason to get out of bed. Why bother going to work when the business you have built or inherited runs itself without you now? If all your necessities and much more were covered for the rest of your life, you might struggle with a lack of meaning and ambition too. My clients are often bored with life, and too many times this leads to them chasing the next high, chemically or otherwise, to fill that void. Most of the people I see are much more willing to talk about their sex lives or substance misuse problems than their bank accounts. Money is seen as dirty and secret. Money is awkward to talk about. Money is wrapped up in guilt, shame, and fear. There is a perception that money can immunize you against mental health problems when actually I believe that wealth can make you and the people closest to you much more susceptible to them. I see family situations like those in Succession all the time. People like the series' lead character Logan Roy, who came from humble beginnings to create an incredibly successful media empire. His entire life has been focused on his business. However, it is evident that he has failed miserably at raising fully functioning children. Too many of my clients want to indulge their children, so they never had to suffer what I suffer while growing up. But the result is that they prevent their children from experiencing the very things that made them successful: sacrifice, hard work, overcoming failure, and developing resilience. An overindulged child develops into an entitled adult who has low self-confidence, low self-esteem, and a complete lack of grit. These very wealthy children start out by going to elite boarding schools and move on to elite universities, developing a language and culture among their own kind. Rarely do they create friendships with non-wealthy people. This can lead to feelings of isolation and being trapped inside a very small bubble. There are few people in the world to whom they can actually relate, which, of course, leads to a lack of empathy. The next time you watch Succession, see how the Roys interact with their staff and others outside their circle. Notice the awkwardness and lack of human connection and how dreadfully they treat each other. It's fascinating and frightening. When one leads a life without consequences for being rude to a waiter or cruel to a sibling, for example, there really is no reason to not do these things. After a while, it becomes normalized and accepted. Living a life without rules isn't good for anyone. Succession is built on the idea of a group of wealthy children vying for who will take the mantle from their father. None of them are able to convince him that they can do it, and that is because they have reached adulthood completely unprepared to take on any responsibility. The wealthy parents I see, often because of their own guilt and shame, are not preparing their children for the challenges of managing their wealth. There is truth in the old adage, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, in 3 generations. On numerous occasions, the child of a wealthy family has said to me, "We never talked about money. I don't know how much there is or what I'm supposed to do with it. I don't know how to take care of it. It's all so secret and dirty." I was raised in a small town in rural Kentucky, solidly middle class, and it can be very difficult to watch these individuals struggle with the toxicity of excess, isolation, and deep mistrust. Succession is a dramatized version of the world they operate in. It is made for television, and part of its purpose is to give audience the pleasure of watching the wealthy struggle. But for someone who has worked with them, I know that their challenges are real and profound. I rather like this perspective, this very rare insight and empathy towards the wealthy. There is actually a solution. And I hope that Clay Cockrell will say this to the wealthy people he looks after. Give your money to the poor. These people are lacking in ambition or lacking in direction or purpose. Well, they should take their wealth and they should give it to the poor. That there is something good and meaningful about taking your wealth and using it to help others. And you don't need to think too hard about why this would work. That simply improving someone's life is easy if you are wealthy. And you can see figures. Someone like Dolly Parton, I think, is a wonderful example of this. Someone who has made their wealth and has decided to use it for good and essentially just gives their money away. I don't see why this should be so difficult. I'm more or less of the opinion that it should be built into the system itself, that it shouldn't be possible to accrue the type of wealth that we are talking about here. We don't allow people to murder others. We don't allow for excesses that are obviously and overtly destructive. And yet when it comes to greed, we seem completely fine. We seem completely fine with the idea that someone can simply get as much as they possibly can with no limit, no end whatsoever. Which, of course, I believe ties in to this manic religious ideology of infinite growth. The wrong-headed belief that this is an open system instead of a closed one, and that there are rules that must be followed. And so I would say to these wealthy people who are struggling with meaning or struggling with any of this kind of stuff, pick up your Bible, give it a read, give your money to the poor. It's interesting to discover that even the primary beneficiaries of this system are miserable. Isn't that interesting to discover? Isn't it interesting to dwell upon and think about? It's very easy for us to contemplate and think that the wealthy are sitting at the top of this thing and they're living the high life, and so it creates this oh, you're just envious of the rich kind of attitude, but they're miserable too. That the burden of maintaining this system of misery spreading rests on their shoulders, and it rests on them heavily. And they seem trapped in it. They don't know what to do with it. That not only does the system create misery through poverty generation, through overworking people, through exploitation, through overt slavery and war, but that the people who are the primary beneficiaries of such a thing end up being completely miserable. So who is winning this game of capitalism in the end of it all? Who can we point to and say, there they are. They're happy, they're content, they've got everything they wanted out of life. They're not miserable at all. Who? Why are we fighting to maintain this system? Who is left? Who is left? This is why I say that when we take to the streets and surround the halls of power, we should beseech the wealthy to join us, because they're miserable too. This system is a failure across the board. it is working for no one. Not the very poor, not the supposed middle class, not the upper class, and not the super wealthy. Everyone is having an absolutely terrible time of it. It's time to tear the system down. For the good of every single one of us. Because even the people who are supposed to be benefiting the most despise what's happening to them. It should end. And as always, it could end. It could end very easily and very simply. We just stop. There's no mystery to it. We just stop. Did Parliament resume today? Who knows? Let's ask the internet, shall we? Did Parliament resume? When did Parliament resume? Here's the good question to ask. Let's see. House of Commons sitting calendar. Let's find out. I'm feeling quite proper, you know? This always happens to me when I get, depressed. Is that I come out of it feeling very proper and prim. I feel like I speak with a kind of flourishing eloquence when I get into this stage. It feels, I don't know, it feels simultaneously real and false. Do you understand me? I feel like I'm steadily becoming a wizard. Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Is it fair for me to say this from what you're observing of me, that I'm steadily becoming a wizard? It would be really nice if I could cast spells. Right? It shifts the energy, it's weird. You're right about that, certainly. And just, I don't know. There's something fun, in a way, about being just extra proper. Extra proper. I'll just be extra eloquent. Extra loquacious. There you go. That's a word that might mean something. Yes, theatrical. Perhaps the theatrical background has something to do with it. I don't know. And then it'll go away, and I'll be back to being just a normal Luddite once again. What am I even looking at? What's the date? Okay, November 22nd. Yes, so they went back. Look at how much time they take off. These layabouts. These slothful vagabonds. How dare they? How dare they tell us to work harder while they literally, 4 months of the year. 4 months of the year, and of course the best months of the year. These hackneyed, stout-nosed boon swoggles. I don't know, I'm reaching, but it's fun. Beverly Hillbillies, where Jed's sister Pearl tells him he's now rich. He needs to walk around looking bored. Jed asks why they are bored. Pearl replies, because they don't work for a living. Yes. Can I tell you, Jethro from that show, there's a man who lived a real life. You know? Anytime I watch any kind of Beverly Hillbillies, Jethro, he's the guy that I'm just like, there you go. He's just fucking around the whole time, getting himself into trouble, right? And if he gets himself into real trouble, he just buys his way out, right? But he seems happy, right? He seems perfectly happy. And he's never actually doing anything evil or deceitful, right? It's just like classic, like, you know, he went swimming in a mud hole over there, and it turns out he wasn't supposed to, and oh gosh, I'm sure sorry about that. Yeah. Well, they don't mind tents on sidewalks as long as there are no poor people in them. This is especially true here in Toronto, I feel, given that we actually paid money to clear our park encampments in an act of total barbarity. Yeah, why the Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty verdict is not a surprise to legal expert. This is something that has been given to me several times by people commenting on my last video, and it misses the point entirely. The fact that it was all done legally is the concern. That people are continuously attempting to convince me that, like, oh no, but it's fine, right? It's well within the bounds of the legal system. Look, here's the legal argument and all of this. That's the problem, friend. Like, I'm not arguing against the legality of it. I'm arguing that the legal system is fraudulent. If these are the outcomes that the legal system is producing, then the legal system is fraudulent. Right? And it should be very clear to anyone with a moral conscience. Like, Kyle Rittenhouse went across state lines with an AR-15 to a protest that he knew was going to be full of people of all sorts. He put himself in harm's way in order to open fire on people. And the legal system says that's fine. Very concerning. Very troubling. It's very concerning that people are even standing up and attempting to defend this. And extra concerning that they seem to not understand that something can both be legal and wrong. That's what's very concerning to me. It seems as though our society has just lost the ability to have an ethical core. That we don't actually know what the ethical core of a being is. That we seem incapable of actually looking at someone else and saying, I have empathy for your position. I wish to improve your position. And we seem to not understand that it is through the improving of other people's lives that we truly find our meaning. That we've created such a selfish society that when we even come to the question of finding meaning, it's an impossibility because we don't consider that our meaning may come from our interactions with others. And that improving the lives of other people who are not your own typically has a great deal to do with finding your own meaning. I'm still shocked the mother wasn't charged with anything. Yeah. Honestly, like, from my perspective, the Rittenhouse, this case really does show, like, there are gigantic gaps that exist in the American legal system. That a young man can simply walk into a gun shop and walk out with one. I was saying at the beginning, right, that I saw a video not that long ago. Well, it's quite some time ago now, actually, but a 14-year-old kid literally walking into a gun shop. He first walked into like an alcohol store and got turned down for alcohol and like laughed out of the store. And then he turns around and goes into a gun shop and walks out with a shotgun. Like, there's a disconnect there. There's a disconnect there, right? No one's saying you shouldn't be able to have a gun. But maybe we should actually make sure you know what you're doing with that gun, right? Maybe we should actually put you through at least the same level of scrutiny that we do when it comes time to drive a car, you know? It seems like America's free market capitalism has failed in this particular case. And I've got to compare the Kyle Rittenhouse case to a case that's currently going on where a young lady by the name of Crystal, I forget her last name offhand, but Crystal, when she was 16, she's a black woman, of course. When she was 16, she was kidnapped, raped, and sold into sex slavery, along with a group of other women. To free herself, Crystal murdered this man, right? Or I shouldn't say murdered. She killed this man in order to escape and free the other people. And she was sentenced to life imprisonment because what she did wasn't considered self-defense or reasonable according to the legal system. And it really flows into what I've been saying this entire time. If she was white, her story would be blasted across international news stories. We would be talking about it for months if she was white. And if Kyle Rittenhouse was black, he wouldn't have survived the night. These statements to me are obvious. I don't think that they're even debatable. Like, we have an incredible amount of examples of people of color experiencing just a completely different legal system. Because at the end of the day, America doesn't actually have much of a legal system. Laws are sort of made up ad hoc, it seems, with it all kind of coming down to the opinion of the jury, with no sincere laws on the books. And so if you have a racist jury, they're going to act differently from black people to white people. And is it any surprise that the society is descending into this period of civil war? How long until another Rittenhouse shows up? Only instead of it being someone like Kyle, who seems to me to be kind of just a dumb kid, frankly. Like, he doesn't have he isn't ideologically motivated. He's not standing there pounding on the pulpit saying, like, he's not like a mega Trumper type. In fact, in an interview he just had with Tucker Carlson, he outright said he supports the Black Lives Matter movement. Right? Now, whether or not that's him trying to survive after he's released into the streets is a contemplation to have. But he's not doubling down. He's not trying to be the hero of the mega cult. He's not trying to be an alt-right kind of a person. He's not attempting to do that. And in many ways, I think that he is just a dumb kid who did something stupid. He probably did go down to that protest to try and be macho, right? Act like the cops do, like form the line, and didn't quite understand or realize what it was going to be like, and was confronted with reality. It probably scared him because he's just a little boy, right? And I'm not saying that to insult him or emasculate him or any of that. He's a young man. He was 17, right? He's a boy who's probably never been confronted with something serious, who's probably never been confronted with anything real in his life. He's probably been fairly coddled, frankly. And he walks into the street with an AR-15, which the state says he's allowed to do for some reason. And he's confronted by grown men holding weapons, shouting at him as he stands on the side of the police, and he opens fire on them, most likely out of fear. And in truth, like, it's America that failed him and America who failed the people he shot on. He should have never been able to stand in the streets with that weapon in the first place. It's an absurdism that he was. It's an absurdism that at no point, not his parents, not his teachers, not the police, not the justice system, not lawyers, not judges, not politicians, no one at any stage of that said you can't carry an assault rifle loaded, ready to go on the streets. It's madness. It's madness compounded upon madness. And Kyle Rittenhouse is showing us very directly the consequences of such things. what happens now when the next Kyle Rittenhouse is ideologically motivated? And the next one likely will be. Because this result has shown those who are ideologically motivated, I can take a weapon, any weapon I like, an AR-15, an assault rifle. I can carry it around in the midst of a protest, and if anyone even shows me a weapon of any sort, I can open fire on them and claim self-defense. That's where the true terror is going to come in. This case is a true tragedy. There are no winners. The precedent has been set now for the ideologically motivated to pull this claim. Exactly. Yeah, groups might start doing it. Well, I mean, it is what the Nazis did, right? The Nazis would go into communist neighborhoods and begin to incite violence. And once the communists began to fight back, they would claim self-defense and then pretend to be the victim. Right? It's what the Nazis did. Straight up. And it's not a long jump. It's not a far reach to see this tactic begin getting employed. Because now they've been shown that it works. Right? They've been shown that it works. And while Kyle Rittenhouse might not be the hero that they were hoping for, he might not be the icon that they can rally around, it's only a matter of time. Right? It's only a matter of time until someone puts together that, well, if Rittenhouse isn't the icon, I could be the icon. Yeah, Herbert Norcus became a martyr. Always with the facts, always with the trivia. Mocked Herbert Norcus was a Hitler Youth member who was killed by German communists. He became a role model and martyr for Hitler Youth and was wisely used in Nazi propaganda. Most prominently as the subject of novel and film, Hitler Youth Quecks. If we don't collapse before the end of this year, I mean, I'm watching it, and it's getting scarier. Mm-hmm. It's already happening at a school in the USA, happening now. Library books burned while yelling out anti-Semitic state sayings. Mm-hmm. These are the troubling times. These are the troubling times that we face. And to just take a sharp turn, because I've got to pee, I actually have a video ready to go while I take this break. More Jordan Peterson shit. You know things are getting absolutely ridiculous. Hey, Dan, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. You know things are getting ridiculous when paying attention to Jordan Peterson is the reprieve, right? Is the break. So here, let's take a bit of a break and take a look at what Mr. Peterson has to say.
Here's Jordan Peterson.
This comes from Sam Cedar.
Understand what he's trying to argue here. It is, it's very illustrative. If you are one of the people who are, somewhat repelled, and I think in certain instances, I don't think it's as big of a deal, like Jamal Bowie had said to us, get a little bit repelled by the idea of like racism as aesthetics and, what you call sort of like, people malign wokeism as being like, too about like, I don't know, just
victims and stuff like that.
Victims, but also like the proper thing to say and this and that. Understand, Jordan Peterson's saying basically the same thing. He is talking that there is no phenomena of racism. There are just people who are mean based upon race. And here he is explaining this concept, and people who actually know what they're talking about with this stuff are just sort of aghast.
Well, that's a fair point. I'll come to John.
I think the same point I made earlier applies, is that...
Oh, pause it for 1 second. They're responding. Apparently, there was a British cricketer. Is it British? A guy named Azim Rafiq. And apparently he experienced racism from his teammates. And
Who better ask than Jordan Peterson about
right,
that?
exactly. BBC panel.
Well, that's a fair point. I'll come to George.
I think the same point I made earlier applies, is that things need to be particularized rather than generalized, as a general rule, let's say. And so this cricket player was facing racism by his own account.
Now pause it. Now pause it for 1 second. Okay, like understand what he's saying here. Things need to be particularized as opposed to generalized. In other words, I am going to start with the premise that there are no societal phenomenons, that there is no structure to society whatsoever. And you will see if I start with that assumption, that basic premise, that there are no structures, that there are no broad trends within society, that there is nothing undergirding our existence in society, that moment to moment are completely distinct, that individual to individual are completely distinct. There is no shared experience. There are no shared institutions. If I start with that premise, which is what he says, then guess what? I'm going to find no structural racism. You start with that premise, guess what? You're going to find no structural anything. But that is understand, and it is not a coincidence that this guy is a psychologist as opposed to a sociologist or an anthropologist or anybody else who comes from the perspective of like, we actually are social beings. We create structures and institutions. There is such a thing as society, and that one society is not the same as another society. And the things that differentiate them is not the individual attributes of each individual in there, but rather the way they are structured.
Yeah, this is why he fetishizes the individual.
All right, play from the beginning, Bradley.
Well, that's a fair point. I'll come to George.
I think the same point I made earlier applies, is that things need to be particularized rather than generalized, as a general rule, let's say. And so this cricket player was facing racism by his own account. The question is, who, when, what, exactly? Because otherwise it degenerates into something like a discussion of structural racism. And when it becomes abstracted up to that level, first of all, that pits group against group, which I think is entirely counterproductive. And it actually doesn't address the issue. You know, racism is a global and vague term.
Sorry, but
Why
would you possibly do that? What did that mean?
Because I said it was a global and vague term.
The inverted commas as if it's not a real thing.
No, that isn't what it meant.
Well, what did it mean then? Explain.
It meant that it's indicative of low-resolution thinking. And what I mean by that is, we use all these terms frequently in discussions like this that are
He was
containers
called
of
abusive terms.
undifferentiated
He was
content.
repeatedly called abusive terms directly linked to his ethnicity.
By who?
By not just one, but repeated members of the...
So this is good enough, right? And Sam's going to have his commentary, which I think his commentary is pretty close to what my commentary would be as a communist, right? That I've said it before on this channel, right? Jordan Peterson does not have a materialist critique of his society, right? That he lives in a very abstracted kind of place, right? Because he doesn't have a materialistic perspective, right? He's not rooted on the ground, right? He's living in the clouds. He's living in a fairy tale. And where he roots himself is in the individual, because that can make sense to him, right? Because he works with individuals on a one-to-one basis and likely does good work on that one-to-one basis with those individuals. But I think the key thing, right, the linchpin of this particular moment really shows you that he says that once you get into above an abstract, right, so if you take it from the individual to an abstract, or I might say meta perspective, right, you create groups, right, this is what he says, you create groups, and that pits them against one another. So what Peterson is saying of the people who are doing the work in the meta, the anthropologists and sociologists and Marxists, right, is that they are creating groups comprised of individuals and then pitting those groups against one another. And because he lacks a materialist analysis, he doesn't realize that these groups exist materially. They are material groups that materially exist without a doubt, and that those groups are pitted against one another already. That we are not pitting them against one another. We are saying they are pitted against one another. We are observing material reality. We are seeing the groups that exist within that material reality and seeing why their material positions or structures in the society pit them against one another. Peterson's perspective is that this is a created phenomenon because he simply doesn't understand the subject, right? He doesn't understand, like he literally doesn't know what he's talking about. So his point is, oh, if you talk about groups, right? No, it needs to be all individual, because if you talk about groups, well, then I need to see myself as part of the group and the structure, right? And I have to begin seeing myself as a beneficiary of the structure or a victim of the structure. You have to, right? If you begin analyzing your society on a material perspective, i.e. based in reality, what's actually factual and true on the ground. And there are clear and obvious examples of this that are indisputable, right? Like the Indian Act. There is a document that exists in Canadian law that was erected and created that creates groups. Systemically, one might argue that it is a systemically racist document that creates or has created groups. And it doesn't matter how much individual analysis you do, right? If you ignore the existence of these systemic documents that most certainly exist, and denying them is to be crazed, is to be deranged, frankly. And if you don't understand how those systemic documents can have profound effects on individuals, then you can condemn the actions of individuals without understanding the root systemic causes of those actions. Right? That a person who is starving to death will steal food. And if all you say is they're stealing food, therefore they are criminals, because I have an individualistic perspective, and you ignore that food is being withheld from them systemically, because you don't have a materialist analysis, then you will criminalize things that could be resolved systemically, and in many cases easily resolved systemically. And so, yet again, we have another crystal clear example of why Jordan Peterson fails as an intellectual thinker. Because while on a one-to-one basis, I suspect talking to Jordan Peterson about your life would actually be very positive for a person. I suspect that every single person in this chat would speak with Jordan Peterson and find it to be an experience worth having. I suspect that would be the case. But that doesn't mean that he understands the society he lives in. That just makes him a really good cheerleader. That just makes him an excellent motivational speaker. And you can hear it in the way he talks about, well, once it zooms out to the abstract and all this blah, blah, it becomes fairy farts to him. Because he has no materialist analysis, nor does he have respect for those who do. Right? That the idea that there are social groups and that those social groups have been pitted against one another is a foreign concept to him that he refuses to acknowledge exists. Which is why he sounds incoherent in these conversations. And that, to me, like, if Jordan Peterson suddenly started to root his analysis in a material observation of his society, he could be very powerful. He still could be. He still could be. But until he starts rooting his analysis in the material, as opposed to this sort of belief that it's all one-to-one individuals, which is falsifiable easily, it's easily falsifiable, he's just going to sound completely incoherent. I still don't understand how Jordan Peterson became an icon. Like, how? I did watch him. He's a good linguist. Yeah, almost scary how polarizing he can be for those who don't apply critical thought. Jordan Peterson is absolutely indicative of how, I don't want to say easy, but how powerful the propaganda system is. Right? You guys are really going on the Kermit thing, right? Peterson is a defender of capital. He defends individualism, right? He essentially defends everything that neoliberalism stands for, right? That is who he is as a figure. And so the propaganda system put him in front of us, put him in front of us, put him in front of us, over and over and over again, put him in front of us, right? That he basically spoke to everyone, right? He spoke to everyone constantly, and he was constantly foisted in front of us. His book was put on all the bookshelves. He was put up, all of the algorithms, all of his work went through, right? He was forced down our throats. Like, and if it wasn't Peterson, it would have been someone else. Right? And this is the power of the propaganda system, that it will make people famous just by showing them to us so much, right? And because there is a complete dearth of actual credible intellectual speakers being popularized, right? Like, the propaganda system isn't shoving Richard Wolff down your face. Right? The propaganda system isn't shoving Mark Blythe down your face, Chris Hedges, not even Noam Chomsky, right? Not even Noam Chomsky, right? So who are they shoving down your throat? Jordan Peterson. Why? Because Jordan Peterson wants to do away with the specious notion that there is a material analysis to be done, that you can look at facts and evidence and concrete economics and have a materialist analysis of your society that includes an understanding that there are groups that have benefited from the structural systems that exist, and there are groups who have not. And those groups have been pitted against one another, which he misunderstands to be us pitting groups against each other, instead of seeing that the groups have been pit against one another, in order to attempt to resolve the conflict between them. Right? And this is why Peterson has no analysis of empire or foreign politics, right? Because, like, what is a nation except a group, right? And America is a group that has invaded another group. It's a group of individuals individualizing their individualism. It's incoherent. It doesn't make sense. And if you don't have the material analysis, then you can't move forward rationally. Right? Like, he doesn't even acknowledge that there is an empire at play. right? He doesn't even acknowledge, like, he doesn't talk about American foreign policy because he can't. How could he? Right? Like, this is the incoherence of his fetishization and his fundamentalism towards individualism. The United States military itself is a group. It's designed to be a group. It's a hierarchy, right? And it's a touch odd that a man who talks about hierarchies and the importance of hierarchies, when it comes to issues like racism, seems to not understand that there are also hierarchies of systemic racism as well. And that an institution, a hierarchy, can become fundamentally corrupted with documents such as the Indian Act, which is real and exists. And so the reason why we even know about Jordan Peterson is because he's just shoved down our throats, right? He gets to sit on this panel, not someone like Richard Wolff, right? And because he's like the only well-known conservative in the discourse any longer, who isn't just a complete repugnant bore, he's the kind of go-to guy now, right? He's the popular conservative. And because there's this dearth of intellectuals, a lot of people have glommed on to Jordan Peterson because he's filled a vacuum. That's all. He's filled a vacuum. And I will say this of Jordan Peterson. Part of his success is that he doesn't condescend to the people who have been condescended to in the society, which is the racists and the fascists and the Nazis, right? And like the right-wingers and the boomer types and all this, he doesn't condescend to them. In fact, he condescends to their enemies, right? So, of course, they're going to gravitate towards him, even if he isn't of that quality. He definitely if you're defending traditional Western values while simultaneously denying the existence of structures like the patriarchy, you're gonna be very popular, right? Low resolution thinking of a privileged white man, that as individuals we don't influence other people's ideologies. Putting air quotes when he says the word racism, yeah, right? Like it's because I think, like, we are getting into kind of personal questions that I think only Peterson can answer. Like, why is he doing that? Like, what is it that he refuses to confront in himself? Frankly, like, at this stage in the game, I have to start asking these questions about Peterson. Like, what is it that he refuses to confront in himself? What acts has he done in his own life that are obviously racist, that are obviously wrong, right? Everyone has these in their lives. And the only reason a man would work this hard in order to deny what is obviously the truth is because he has some kind of deep-seated shame, guilt, fear, resentment that he can't confront, right? And it could be quite deep. Like, it could be quite deep, like literally something his father did, right? That he knows was wrong and that he knows is deeply racist, but he can't come to terms with it. And he doesn't want to contemplate that he, like, and a man like him likely doesn't want to contemplate that there's a good chance that there's a structural racist element to it. Because he doesn't know what to do. Right? As long as you believe it's all just individuals, then you can believe that you can influence the society on a one-to-one basis and change things that way. But that's fundamentally not how things function or work. Ultimately, it does require systemic change. That you have to come together and acknowledge there is a system in place. And perhaps you can galvanize individuals to get together, but it has to be towards the goal of eradicating this system that is certainly there. Like his denial of the systems I find to be very troubling. I find that very, very, very troubling because there are clear systems. Clear, like, I keep bringing up the Indian Act, but it's very, very, like, that's a very obvious one. You really, really got to be a dunder to look at the Indian Act and think, no, it's still individuals being individualized in their individualism. Like, yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. So, this has been your 10 minutes, 15 minutes of Jordan Peterson. I do hope he comes around. I do. Like, if he starts, if Jordan Peterson suddenly began actually taking seriously a materialist analysis of his society and a structural analysis of his society, he could be very brilliant. I really believe this about him. Like, and I think it could happen quite quickly for him. Like, in the space of a year. Like, he could very, very quickly become a real force if he were to root his analysis. And I don't necessarily mean he needs to become a communist, but just like even having like an understanding of like basic economics would really, really help him, right? Like really, really basic things. And if that were to happen to him, he could become very, very influential and very scary to the corporate state. If that started to happen, you watch, he'll disappear. All the algorithms will drop him, all that kind of stuff. It'll happen instantly if he started to do that. Yeah, too bad money and ego are involved. Absolutely. Absolutely. I really do hope he does come around. If he just accepts what happened and analyzes it from the materialist view, it'll change your country's history. Yeah, absolutely. And like, I don't know how you can maintain this idea of individualism while simultaneously maintaining the idea of hierarchies, right? Like, that's an incoherence in his thinking. Like, he acknowledges the existence of hierarchies, which are systems that exist, but everything needs to be brought down to the individual level. It doesn't. It's like, I mean, don't get me wrong. It is both, right? It is both. That there are individuals and individuals make up these systems, but ultimately these systems are what persist, right? That when these individuals die, the systems persist, right? And the people who are inheriting the systems don't necessarily know how the systems work, which is part of the joy of being a human being. But I'm saying it's both, and he's saying it's only one, which makes him a fundamentalist. Which, if you are a fundamentalist on anything, it makes you incoherent. There are very, very, very few things that you can stand firmly on. And if you do, you better fucking be right. Like, you better be fucking right. They are few and far between. Very, very rare. And Peterson's kind of gone off into left field, or lives kind of in airy-fairy farty town, while simultaneously trying to tell everybody else. Like, and it's so frustrating because he's like, clean up your room and do these materialist things, but like, he doesn't leap over. And anyway, I'm going to get off Jordan Peterson and just end with being like, who hurt you, Jordan? Who hurt you? What happened in your life? What happened in your life? All right. Moving on. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister, very concerned BC pipeline protest will spread across Canada. Yeah, I hope so. Right? I got a great one here on this. Come on, where are you? I've got one that has David Suzuki. Gonna pull this right up here. David Suzuki says pipelines will be blown up if leaders don't act on climate change. A renowned environmental activist has stern warning for politicians and global leaders if they fail to act on climate change. There are going to be pipelines blowing up if our leaders don't pay attention to what's going on, David Suzuki told Czech News on Saturday without elaborating further. The prominent environmentalist made comments during an Extinction Rebellion Vancouver Island protest called A Funeral for the Future in downtown Victoria on Saturday afternoon. Suzuki was also at the group's first event in the United Kingdom in 2018. I saw the power of civil disobedience, he said, later adding, people in Extinction Rebellion are saying we're headed in a direction of extinction and we're rebelling against it. That's why I'm here. It is now the age of consequences. We need action. We need a declaration of a climate emergency by this NDP government, and we need them to begin to act with the reality of that emergency. We need changes in policy, no more investment in fossil fuel infrastructure, said Dr. Don Goodeve, an organizer with Extinction Rebellion Vancouver Island. Like, I'm going to be reporting, like, if somebody goes and blows up a pipeline, I will report on them as if they are a hero. For sure. Like, I'm not going to even pretend. I'm not even going to couch the language. Like, we are committing a mass suicide here. Like, we are committing a mass suicide here. There's no other way to talk about it. And if places like the Toronto Star are beginning, and the Crown Indigenous Relations Minister is beginning to get worried that it's going to spread, good. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller expressed regret Monday that RCMP officers arrested 15 people at a Wet'suwet'en blockade in northern British Columbia, saying he is very concerned that rising tensions over the long-contested Coastal GasLink pipeline could spiral into another nationwide solidarity movement. I hope so. I'm here to encourage it. I'm here to tell everybody, rebel, revolt, stop all of this nonsense. Completely and 100%. That if you just bow your head and go along with it, you are betraying your own children. There's no other way to say it. I hope that they're scared. I hope that they are anticipating it, because it's going to happen if I have anything to do with it. We're an embarrassing people. Like, why are we even pretending? Like, why are we even pretending? I heard an Alberta MLA say that socialism is the enemy of self-reliance while his salary is paid by socialism. Here's the annoying thing that these that these pro-capitalist types pretend, right? Like, the reality is that the only reason they were able to succeed in this capitalist system is because they had a foundation to step off of, right? And that's true across the board. Like, every single time someone's been successful in the capitalist model, it's because they had some event or something that they were able to step off and springboard onto, right? Like, and sometimes it isn't as clear cut as, like, my daddy gave me a bunch of money. Like, my own family history. Like, my grandfather and father built an auto mechanic business, right, that they were very proud of. They worked hard at. That's great. But it would have been completely meaningless had the government not been funding huge amounts of money into creating infrastructure, right? So their entire livelihood is completely impingent on spending by the state, right? If they didn't run the Trans-Canada Highway through, if they didn't run the Via Rail through, if they didn't create this infrastructure that was absolutely necessary to create all of this automation and all of these automated vehicles in the first place, then my grandfather and my father would have had no business whatsoever. They would have just been rural country bumpkin farmers, probably failing at it too, right? Which isn't a knock on them. Like, the weather has something to say about that. But this conservative idea that, like, I worked hard and that's what, like, again, it comes down, if you don't have a materialist analysis of your society, right? If you're not rooted in reality, if all you know is what's up to your nose and that's it, then you can pretend that, like, yeah, it was my hard work that got it done. It's just simply never been the case. You can always point to, like, massive government infrastructure spending. In many cases, these rural farmer types are still living on land that was given to their family in a land giveaway, right? Like, it's blistering that these guys are still walking around pretending like their entire livelihood isn't, like, yes, they're working hard, right? Absolutely, they're working hard. Just like the government is working hard to ensure they succeed, right? Like, this sort of this incomplete analysis of what's actually going on is deeply frustrating. Deeply, deeply frustrating. And they can just pretend like, well, I'm an individual. Didn't you also get 30 acres of free land given to you by your father? Isn't that what happened? Why didn't you just use the free land that was given to you by your father? Oh yeah, we are. I'm actually livid about Elon Musk being celebrated as a hero when it's changed to electric mood, fossil fuels cars, to bigger pollute. Yeah. Elon Musk is a fraud across the board. There isn't one thing about Elon Musk that is actual and real. Like, you want to talk about a guy that's pure ego and just pure daddy issues, you're talking about Elon Musk. Here's a guy who literally is only doing what he's doing so that he will get deceive himself into believing that his father loved him when it's likely that his father was incapable of those emotions. Like, really? Like, his dad was a slaver. His dad owned slaves in apartheid South Africa, right? It's extremely likely that Elon Musk just never got any love from his dad. Never, like, no hug, no nothing, probably not even an I love you. And so everything he's doing is just to prove to his daddy that he's worth something. Right? It's like Batmanism, right? It's just like he's got this scar that he's wearing that he can't actually deal with. And so he just fills that void with trying to convince everybody that he's this super genius when he's not, right? When he's fucking not. And you just need to have a basic materialist analysis of his life to see that this is the truth, right? Like, he's never invented anything. He literally just buys the rights to be called an inventor, right? And like, why would he pay? Like, it's Elon Musk is fascinating in this regard, like how deep his daddy issues actually are. But outside of that, like, I don't really like the simps are what get me the most, man. The simps are crazy. But I mean, you know, people simp for all types. BC NDP are the worst. Horgan really needs to be replaced, but too bad many of his cabinet are similarly centrist. Yeah. BC NDP are the most conservative anti-government I've seen in so long, right next to Dexter and Nova Scotia. I mean, like, money, right? Money gets it done. Like, everybody becomes a conservative once there's, like, millions of dollars dangled in front of their face. Like, and let's not bullshit ourselves, right? Like, you're telling me that you become the premier of the NDP and suddenly the fossil fuel industry is like, here's all this money you could have, and you're just going to say no? Which, this is why billionaires are dangerous. It's dangerous to have a billionaire in your society. Because you're going to use energy, and those energy sources are based off fossil fuels and aren't green or renewable. Yeah. And Horgan is anti-indigenous, pro-pipeline, anti-nature, and anti-electoral reform. How is he NDP and not liberal again? Well, I mean, just like all of these scam artists, right? Like, if the wind started blowing towards the NDP, suddenly a bunch of these liberals would be NDPers, right? Like, it's just where the political wind is blowing. Like, they're duplicitous. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I know, hey DJ, how you doing, bud? I know a guy who's conservative, said he never got a handout, yet also told me his family, when he moved to Canada, got 360 acres free land grant during a resettlement. Yeah, that is called the Canada Dominion Act. Dominions Land Act. The Dominions Land Act was a federal law that received royal assent on 14th April 1872. It allowed for lands in Western Canada to be granted to individuals, colonization companies, the Hudson Bay Company, railway, construction, municipalities, and religious groups. The act set aside land for First Nation reserves. Métis lands were organized by the government outside the Dominions Land Act. Also national parks, right? So it's doing a bunch of stuff. It covered eligibility and settlers' responsibilities and outlined a standard measure for surveilling and subdividing land. Some 1.25 million homesteads were made available over an expanse of about 80 million hectares, the largest survey grid in the world. The act was repealed in 1930 when the land and resources were transferred from the federal government to the provinces. From 1870 to 1930, roughly 625,000 land patents were issued to homesteaders. As a result, hundreds of thousands of settlers poured into the region. And let's be really, really clear. They were able to get into that territory and get that land The act specified a specific home at blah 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 for any person over the age of 21 was eligible to land patents for a quarter section, a 65 hectare plot. Here you go. Most eligible homesteaders who paid a $10 administrative fee were given 3 years to build a habitable residence, clear the land for farming, and cultivate a certain area annually. They were expected to live on the lot for 6 months. Such requirements were created to discourage land speculation, etc., etc. So if you had a $10 bill, right? If you had $10, so like how much is $10 in 1872 today? So if you had $226, right? If you had $226, how many acres is 62 hectares? If you had $250, you could get 150 acres. Where's my 150 acres for $250? Huh? Like, these rural, like, country boy types, these guys are saying bootstraps and all that kind of shit, right? They're so full of shit. Like, they're so full of shit. Like, and it's obvious that they're full of shit. Like, you literally just need to say to these guys, hey, where'd you get your land from? Oh, your daddy gave it to you? Oh. Like, yeah, no systemic, like, no systems, right? It's all just individuals individualizing their individualism. No systems, right? No obvious, overt, built-in systems that have had dramatic impacts on resource distribution here in Canada, right? Like, this premise is so falsifiable. It's easy to falsify it. The fact that there's anybody walking around with this credible, like, pretending to be credible. Like, ugh. Then again, it was the BC NDP way to be, is the way the government is dealing with the way the government is dealing with the Wet'suwet'en is disgusting. It's farther than center right, dude. Like, it is. It's farther than center right. It's firmly right wing. Like, it's firmly right wing. Even edging farther to the right than that. Like, it is not a it is pretty brutal. Like, the Canada is a country that wakes up to find whole towns and key infrastructure destroyed by climate change, and the first thing it does is send in the militarized cops to arrest the only people standing in the way of its oil and gas corporations expanding their footprint. Like, look at this picture in the bottom left-hand corner here. That's not center right. You hate socialism so much, but your phone uses satellite technology developed by the Soviet space program. Curious. Yeah. No, don't pay attention to that. Like, don't have an actual materialist. Like, don't look at evidence. Yeah, Wealthy got a lot of free passes. No shit. He couldn't have acknowledged the 360-acre land grant as a handout. Yeah, like, even though it explicitly is. And it was explicitly intended to do that. Right? Like, it's explicitly that they needed as many British, like, white British colonizers in that land as they could get. Right? Because there was a bit of a land rush going on, right? Like, the French versus the English was real, right? You can read documents about these guys, like, lamenting the loss of Quebec, for example, right? That Quebec became, like, a French territory, and the British colonizers were like, oh shit, we got to avoid that. How do we avoid that? Just get a bunch of Brits, jam them into the prairies, give them 360 acres of free land. Like, Yeah, it's a handout, bud. And I've heard people, like, apologists being like, well, they had to work that land. It's not like it was just out there getting it for nothing. You know, they had to work that land. It's like, yeah, bud. Are you honestly telling me that if you were given 360 acres of land or 150 acres of land that you wouldn't work it? I think you're crazy. I think you're absolutely crazy. Like, it would be impossible not to make money, right? It would be impossible not to make money. If all you did was clear cut the land and sell the lumber, you would make a ton of money. You would make a ton of money just clear cutting the land and selling the lumber. Like, and they only had to live on the land like 6 months out of the year. So you're telling me they just get like a 6-month break every so, like, what a sweet deal. What a sweet fucking deal. Right? That's a better deal than I get. Right? It's a better deal than we're getting. Right? We get to rent shitty little apartments and work all the time constantly with like a 10-day vacation or whatever. Right? Like, get fucked. Get fucked. It's a better deal than we got for sure. And honestly, if you can't call it a handout, then you need to shut your mouth. Like, you really do. You need to shut your mouth. Because you obviously don't know what a handout is. Like, you obviously don't know what a handout is. Like, these guys will actually say out loud that, oh, you want your tax money to pay for services. You just want a handout. No, motherfucker. I want my taxes to pay for services. I don't want them to pay for little Palestinian skeletons. I don't want them to pay for weapons sales to Saudi Arabia or militarism or adventurism around the place. I want my tax dollars that I earn and pay to give me services, right? That's not a fucking handout. A handout is getting 360 acres of fucking land for $250. That's a fucking handout. Like, that's the fucking definition of a handout. Christian Freeland said 100% of the jobs are back, so yay, let's enjoy these jobs we don't actually have. Yeah, who believes, like, I really do want to meet these, like, liberals who actually believe this at all. Like, what a ridiculous, like, Christian Freeland over these last few months has really revealed herself to be just like a ridiculous figure. She's like an absurd figure who's like telling these overt, obvious, like very over the top lies that simply cannot be believed or taken credibly at all. But I mean, what do you expect of a Nazi collaborator, right? Like, she's just completely fraudulent. Ford actually admitted accidentally, I think, that 15 isn't enough to live on, but it's tougher on the business owners to pay it. Here's like, this really shows you how illiterate these guys actually are, okay? If you raise the wage, all right, yes, you will have to pay more in wages by like a small amount. It isn't this like dramatic, like, oh my God amount. It really isn't. But if you pay this wage, right? And let's say it does put a little financial stress on you. Well, guess who's going to help you out with that? The fucking bank, right? Don't pretend like you don't have like an in with the fucking bank. You obviously do. How'd you get started, right? So you pay the higher wage, okay? Now, stay with me. Everybody has more money, okay? Everybody has more money, more disposable income, and if your business is worth a goddamn at all, right? If it's actually a business that people want, and if they actually want to go there and get your service or your good that you're providing, well, now there are more people in your economy that have more money. So more people will come and spend money in your business, providing that you are providing a service that they actually want. And so they'll give you more money that will dramatically offset the wages that you paid in the first place, which then you'll be able to turn around and, if you need to, hire more people. It turns out that neoliberal capitalism is a fraud. That it was never an economic system, that it was a religious ideology that fails and doesn't work. And if you don't pay people enough to live, they can't buy things. Very straightforward. Very straightforward. Right? Like, and I do apologize that I have to kind of take this tone with this, but it's becoming very, very clear to me that people at the highest level who have the reins on our economy seem to think otherwise. And so I need to bring it down to its most reductive to show people, if you give money to wealthy people, they take money and put it in a hole. The people who need the money to spend in the economy do not have it. Spending no happen. Economy no go. Take money from hole, give to people. People spend money, economy go. It is very straightforward. It's been made complicated. It's been made difficult so that people can't understand it. And when I started this pursuit of researching these subjects, researching neoliberal economics, and I started to come up against the fact that it's not an economic system, it's a religious ideology, the first thing they told me was, oh, you don't understand it, it's too complex for you. And at first, I was like, well, okay, yeah, these guys, like, they do have PhDs and like all this kind of stuff, but as you dig and as you dig and as you dig, and as you interpret and as you interpret and simplify and make it straightforward so that it can be comprehended and understood, it's a fucking religious ideology. It is not an economic system. It is based on nothing. It fails mathematically. It is a fraud. And anyone who's standing in front of you trying to tell you otherwise is either a con man or the stupidest person in the room. And there's no other position they can have, right? They're either so bought in, so they believe the lie, so they're like Simon Fraser Institute shit, right? Like, if you see Fraser Institute, you can write them off. They're corrupted. You cannot trust what they say. Period. Full stop. They are worse than illiterate. They think they have knowledge when they do not. Like, and it's easy to dismantle them, right? Like, it's easy to dismantle them. Like, oh, you think give money to rich person, trickle down. Show me one time that's worked. Oh, never? Oh, is it because it's not an economic system? Oh. But if you don't have a materialist analysis, you can believe that some guy, I have a PhD in economics from fraudulent religious institution. Like, you might as well have a fucking degree from PragerU. Like, who gives a fuck? And what they also did was, once they did that, they got new people to resurvey, watch the movie, Real talks about it. They made it so other people own part of your land, which created conflict. Yeah, of course. Well, and you want to create conflict, right? Like, you want to create conflict within the lower classes so that they'll bicker amongst themselves, right? And they'll never focus on the upper classes. Sorry, I'm like, you should be sorry, Barn. No, you shouldn't be sorry at all, dude. Yeah, it must be tough going from 10 houses to 9, exactly. Pray for Ford's friends. Yeah, oh my God. Oh, this is before we joined Canada. That's just one thing. The past system went on for years as well. My grandmother brought a homestead for $20 in the 1930s. That's $331 a day. Why the need for guns? I don't know if I understand the question, bud. Sorry, I don't think I understand the context. I was with a girl who got a duplex for around 40K. Wow. Lucky. That's lucky. That's a steal, dude. 40K? Even in 2015. Wow. Ham and eggs pension in California, USA promised $30 a week, $600 today. Yeah. We can do these things. Like, money isn't real. Like, it's so comedic to me when people they get to be like, oh, what's going to happen with the pension? And oh my goodness, and all. Like literally money is not real. Like it is so much more malleable than we have ingrained in our society. Like, it's so much more malleable. And like the pandemic proved it. Like, look how malleable the money actually is. Chateau clique, a group of powerful businessmen, a petty, corrupt, insolent Tory clique, an obligatory who believe they were given the right to govern by God. Yeah. Oversimplified overview of the 1837 rebellions of Lower Canada. They were the Lower Canadian equivalent of the Family Compact in Upper Canada. They were also known on the electoral scene as the Parti Bureaucrate. Bureaucratic Party, also known as the British Party or the Tory Party. Yeah. Yeah, and it's always like rich people who think God put them here, right? Like, I mean, what a wank, eh? Like, oh yeah, bud, you were sent by God, sure. The market in Ontario is beyond insane. You're paying 30 to 40K for condemned rotting catastrophes, yeah. My parents, they had it hard getting prioritized over black families for a mortgage, yeah. Most of the CEOs of major banks in Canada are in favor of a UBI, funnily enough. At least they say so in interviews. Yeah. Well, you're hitting on something there, Matthias. Right? Like, yeah, a fraud and a con man will tell you what you want to hear. Right? Like, they're not going to do it. And they're certainly not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. Right? And what one of the major failings of this capitalist model is that the only way things actually get done is through the mass mobilization of the people, right? And so they're not just going to give you something. They need their houses surrounded, and then they'll actually give you something. And they know that it's exhausting to do this, right? And so that's one of the methods they use to secure their power. Like, oh, we gave you that thing that you all surrounded our houses to achieve, so now go away. And lots of people do, right? Lots of people do. Which is why we need to build a movement to surround their houses and never stop. Like, never stop. Like, literally the entire system is fraudulent. That we only go away when they are literally irrelevant to the system and to the decision-making process any longer. Completely. Like, the death cult needs to die. It needs to go away. A reminder to PM me as I'm starting a loose network to communicate each other if power goes out and we teach bushcraft. Oh, Barnabas. That's ambitious, but understandable, frankly. Let's just end money, period. Yeah, I think people would be... I don't know that people are ready for that, right? Like, I think that money, in a way, grounds people to this reality, and I just don't think that they're prepared to be untethered, you know? You were talking about the First Nation invasions, guns. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, like, more storms incoming, for sure. Another group to write off is Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Yeah, definitely capitalist death cult garbage, for sure. No, you're absolutely right. Like, it's... Like, the second you start seeing this, like, trickle-down shit, and, like, we gotta look out for businesses, like, you are... If that's your ideology, that we need to look out for businesses, you are maintaining illegitimate hierarchies, right? You are, as a guarantee. The only reason a hierarchy should exist at all is at the behest of the public. And in terms of capitalist business structures... If the populace doesn't really want the service that you're selling, then your business goes bankrupt and you leave, right? Like, that was always sort of the promise of capitalism. But then the capitalists get in bed with the politicians and they maintain these hierarchies that are not necessarily legitimate, right? And they force hierarchies to work when perhaps they shouldn't, right? Does it necessarily make sense that Amazon be successful? Like it's enormously subsidized. It's a heavily subsidized system, right? And it's the same thing with Elon Musk, right? Tesla is heavily subsidized. Does it necessarily make sense that these guys should exist at all? When God sent Trump, he was really beating off at somebody. Yeah, exactly. Me and God, we're very tight with one another. Nobody's better than God. And me and God, we're so tight. There are 2 more atmospheric rivers in British Columbia's forecast over the coming days, though neither is expected to be as intense as the first one that triggered widespread. Yeah. But like, aftershocks, right? Aftershocks. Bushcrafting is often, I'm for a moneyless society. I think that there would be lots of people who would be for a moneyless society, and who knows, maybe we'll get there. What's more likely, in my view, is that money will just fade away as being so important. That as the society begins to structure itself more rationally, money will become so ubiquitous and so like people will have access to it to such amounts with an understanding that they can't get infinite amounts of it. But like most people will be able to live their lives and not even really consider it, right? Like that's where I think money will eventually go. Should the society actually begin waking up and becoming rational again. That like money really only exists as a way to distribute goods, but if the goal is to ensure everybody has access to goods, and if everybody has access to the money that they need, then you're just essentially like banking will become this like background noise that like the people who are involved in, they'll be like, counting their beans and like doing all their stuff, and there'll all be these formulas and all this kind of stuff. But that will fade into like the background of people's lives, and it simply will stop being a concern, really. That they'll just like go to the grocery store, get their groceries, right? Go pay rent, but the amount of money that's required to do these things will be so diminished and so low that people won't even really be concerned about it. And like it'll just eventually fade away into kind of obscurity, right? Into just this obscure, like, like once you structure it so that there is no such thing as poverty, it can't exist, right? And then there's no such thing as wealth hoarding, because those two things are twinned. And then everybody lives in this like state of kind of comfort with one another, right? And there's no fucking dumb capitalists who are just sucking life out of this society. People will just kind of forget about the money more or less, right? And I just think that that's a truism. I just think that like if a society was built rationally, and was built for the benefit of its own people, as opposed to a benefit of like 1,000 people, right? And not even to their benefit. They're miserable too, right? But like if the profit motive was just removed and everybody was just operating on this understanding that like, yeah, everybody has food and shelter and all of these things are just built in, right? Then like eventually there just comes a point where people are going to be like, well, what's the money for? What's the point of the money again? I don't understand what's the point of the money. Like, and that's how I see it going, right? Yeah, stop building cities and waterways and lakes and floodplains. They're destroyed now. It's the perfect time to fix it. Yeah, that's not how we think, though, Ruth. Come on. We're just going to build a road that's bigger. This is a road that God can't destroy. Our socialism has a Discord now. How excellent. How excellent. I don't know what to do with all of these other Discords, right? Like, should I be... I feel... I can't go in and, like, promote my shit. Like, I feel weird about that. So I don't know. I don't know what to do about any of that. We keep bailing out companies. What happened to the market deciding, yeah, as I've stated before, if your company is too big to fail, it needs to be nationalized. Absolutely. No, absolutely. And like, what are you talking about, too big to fail? Right? Like, fucking Sauron blew up. You threw that ring into Mount Doom, he fucking blew up. He wasn't too big to fail. Right? No, this too big to fail thing is like, I have a line in one of my songs, which is, why work so hard if it's too big to fail? Right? Like, if it's too big to fail, then why are we working so fucking hard at it? Right? It's too big to fail. Work less. Yeah, takes the country with it. Yeah. I don't know. Is that the worst fucking thing? This fucking place? Anyway. Here's someone out there being positive about shit. I feel like my generation is the first in a long time that has woken up and realized that this life is basically a construct for capital. And we don't have to put up with it. We can bitch and moan and bite and claw, fight and protest for a better world instead of just accepting work until death, police brutality, climate crises, and elections of old white people who enrich themselves. Young people fucking rule. Let's get on this shit. Yeah, come to my protests, Alexis. Show up. Right? Show up to my shit. Tear things up. Literally. Oh, this touches on base here's another video that I really want to show. I'm gonna run off and take another quick break, but I'm gonna show this while I do it, and really think about how strange this is. Really think about how strange this is.
So can I ask you a question? I'm gonna be personal. Can I be personal? How your day been going so far? Kind of rough. I kind of sense that. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do for you is I'm gonna give you your tip right here. That's $100. Okay. You just paid off my car, sir. Keep being nice. Don't let people frustrate you. Because people not nice. Now, you know what? Let me do better than that. Here go another $100. Here you go. Here go another $100. You know what? Let me do better than that. Here go another $100. Here you go. Here you go, sir. Come on. That's $300. Because I'm in the blessing business.
Give your money to the poor. Give your money to the poor. Like, just give your money to the poor. Take your money, give it to the poor. Right? Like, that kid got what, $300? It's like a life-changing amount of money. If you're like a service worker, right? It's an enormous amount of money for a service worker. And part of it is that the wealthy don't really realize that. They haven't really put this together. That like, that amount, just this moment alone can push someone through. Right? Can keep them afloat. Can keep them going. And the wealthy just don't realize this. They're just detached. They don't understand. And we read that article from The Guardian earlier about how like the wealthy are struggling with finding meaning and purpose and all this. Take your money, give it to the poor. See how quickly your perspective of the world changes. It's very straightforward. And even more than that, it's embedded in the documentation of this Western civilization that I'm supposed to cherish. This is, like, I hate to go back to Mr. Peterson, but, like, this is what's most odd about him, is that he holds up this Bible, right? This document that's supposed to be Western civilization. We're supposed to venerate it and protect it and Judeo-Christian values and all this kind of stuff. The man literally says, like, the hero of the story literally says, give your money to the poor. It comes out of his mouth. He says things like, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And Jordan Peterson, who is literally fighting to keep Western civilization and Judeo-Christian values present in the society, does not say out loud ever to anyone ever, give your money to the poor. Oh, you're struggling with meaning as a wealthy person, you're struggling with all that kind of stuff. Well, give your money to the poor. There's a highly individualized thing that an individual can individualize their individualism to help himself plant themselves and find meaning. And I never hear it come out of his mouth. Which tells me he doesn't actually give a shit about that book. So why should we? Give your money to the poor. Hey Benjamin, how you doing, bud? Same dude who told me to buy Tesla at 12 in like 2008 also told me Geronimo's skull was at his college, Southeastern Uni in Boston. Woo. These corporate goons can't be trusted. Oh, you're the man, dude. Well, isn't that nice of you to say, Benjamin? That's super nice. One of the things I've got to remind myself, it's, and I'm glad that I read that Guardian article earlier, because I've got to remind myself, as much as it's so easy to get caught on like the hysteria of being like, fuck the rich, eat the rich, tear them down, burn them to the earth. But they're caught too. They're trapped too. Right? Like they're trapped. And they don't know what to do. They don't know where the escape is. Right? Because they haven't quite gotten into the belief that, like, yeah, give your money to the poor. That's where the escape is. That's where the release valve is for you, right? If you're in that position, give your money to the poor. Which isn't to say, like, I do think that there are rich people who should be imprisoned. Like, I'm just gonna be outright explicit. All of these fossil fuel executives, all of them, right, for sure should be incarcerated. For sure. Like, they knew in the 80s that fossil fuels were causing the problems that we are now facing today. Like, they knew. And not only did they just not tell anybody, right? They literally funded disinformation campaigns. Like, those people should be incarcerated. Like, that's criminal behavior. That's criminal activity. For sure. Stacey Abrams took her campaign funds and paid off college funds for tons of people in student debt. Yeah. I mean, fucking eliminate student debt. Like, just fucking eliminate student debt. Like, it's fake. It's not real. It's manufactured. It's manufactured bullshit. Right? You're ruining people's lives for no reason whatsoever. For no even, like, I don't care if you got to bankrupt out. I don't care if you paid it off, or I don't care if you're in the States and you're totally fucked by it. All of it is illegitimate. And if you are defending it, I don't know what to tell you. Like, stop. Just fucking stop. Like, oh no, we want to improve people's lives. Yeah, this is the article right here. I'm gonna keep that one. I'm gonna tweet this guy. I'm gonna tell him, hey Clay, tell your people, give your money to the poor. Very, very straight fucking forward. Very straightforward shit. Yeah, why Canada's food inflation may get worse before it gets better? Because we refuse to actually balance the money supply. Right? Canada's inflation rate reached 4.7% in October. This is what they're admitting, right? Which means that inflation is worse than this, right? I've been listening to some people who are saying it's as high as 10 or 15%, right? Like, so it's certainly higher than the 4.7 that they're admitting to. But even at that number, right? So the mandate for the Bank of Canada is to have an inflation rate of 2%, right? Kind of fucked up that there's a built-in inflation rate that they're mandated to maintain. And also kind of fucked up that inflation rate is 2%, which is higher than everybody else's wage increases, right? The average wage increase is like 1.5%, right? So it's structurally built in. Oh, but structures don't exist. But it's structurally, systemically built into the system so that your wage will be worth less over time, right? It's designed that way. So if you didn't get a raise of 4.7%, you lost money this year as a guarantee. And there are people who are like going out and striking for an increase of like 2%, right? There are people who are going out and holding like massive strikes for like a wage increase of 2%, which to me is a fucking joke. It's like the fight for 15 people. Like, why are we begging for these scraps? Like, we should shut these fucking places down and tell these capitalists to get absolutely fucked. Like, get absolutely fucked. We just don't have the militancy. We just don't have the cojones. We don't have the guts, right? We don't have the balls. Like, a shipment of them coming from Peru typically takes 12 to 10 days to get to Ontario, to Toronto. These days, it can take 20 to 25 days to get to its destination. Like, this is a stupid thing we're doing, honestly. Like, let the Peruvians keep their blueberries, right? I remember I read an article, like, this is years back, but I read an article about, like, we're doing incredibly fucking stupid things in this global capitalist system. Like, incredibly stupid things. Where we will, like, give money to, like, Guatemalans to help shore up their food. They'll have food shortages, so we'll send them money. But why is there a food shortage? Well, it's because they're exporting all their food to us. And so the solution literally is just let them keep their food. Nope. Dorp, 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 dorp. So we got to send them money as like foreign aid to let them buy other food on the market from some other nation that's producing it while they export their food to us. What a fucking joke. Like, what a fucking dumbass system we have. It's so fucking stupid. Like, it's so fucking stupid. And it's all because we like refuse to grow up and realize that, like, maybe we should plan things. Maybe we should actually have some kind of centralized planning. What do you guys think? Maybe we should make a plan? No? Let chaos reign. The free market will decide. They need a lot of oil and gas to transport those goods overseas as well. Exactly, dude. Exactly. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, we just gotta fucking stop this shit. Like, we just gotta stop. Like, I don't know, maybe a few years of just eating some potatoes will do, right? Like, maybe I feel like we that's what we deserve, right? That we just gotta fucking stop doing this shit and just eat some potatoes for a little while, right? We get back to some fundamental basics. Just get back to just like, oh yeah, I walked down the street and got some milk from the farmer down the street. Yeah. Oh yeah, picked up a bag of potatoes, right? Grown from the local producer down the street. Yeah. Oh yeah. That this imagined version of humanity is obviously not working. Right? And it's all just in our imagination. That's it. Like, one of the great disservices that we have done to ourselves as people is we have denigrated the concept of imagination. And we have said of people who have tried to investigate imagination and have tried to live in an imagination space that they are worthless because they can't sell themselves to capitalists who are the least creative people in the world. We need people to have imagination. We need to imagine a better world, right? And we need those people to be doing it because that's the only way such a thing can be manifest, right? You can't manifest something if you can't imagine it. And so we need people to imagine it and then create a vision for that future and create the foundation for us to strive for and then to manifest it into the world. Right? That's how it actually works. And if we don't do that, then the people who get to manifest their vision into the world are these fucking morons. These fucking like brutalists and total fucking idiots who literally don't know what they're doing and are stupid, frankly. Like their vision is like a childish. People like fucking Bezos and Musk. Like, we're gonna get to Mars. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, shut the fuck up with that. Like, we're not even close to that. That's not serious, right? Like, that's the kind of shit that you start doing once like things are stable here. Like, fucking explore the ocean. How about that? Like, this idea that we're gonna go off into Mars and like terraform Mars while we can't actually sustainably terraform our own planet is a stupid fucking joke. Like, it's going to fail. It's obviously going to fail, right? You can't terraform a planet while simultaneously failing to terraform the planet you live on, right? Like, we're gonna pollute and destroy the shit out of this planet, and we definitely aren't gonna do that to Mars. As Radiohead sang, riot shields in the IMF. Yeah, the Ethiopian famine of the 1980s was created by Western countries demanding they produce cotton instead of food for their nation. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and don't forget, like, this is another reason why I actually think that it's incredibly dangerous to not have a materialist meta-commentary. Because if you don't have a meta-commentary of societies, then you don't know when societies have actually gone into hysteria. And this society is in a hysteria. It's absolutely in a hysteria. That if we were to sit down and actually talk to one another rationally and reasonably, there is no way we walk away from the table being like, yeah, we'll just destroy ourselves by polluting so that we can have cars go fast, right? And shoot rockets into space and shit. Right? Yeah, it totally makes sense that the United States military can just be a massive polluter in the world for no fucking reason whatsoever, right? But that's not how we're acting. We are not acting rationally. We are in a hysteria that has been brought on by a religious cult. For sure. Like, there is no other way to call it. This is a mass hysteria. And if you refuse to acknowledge that there's a meta-critique that can be achieved through materialist analysis, then you can't possibly ever conclude that the people you're talking to are amidst a fucking hysteria. Right? When the Salem witch trials happened, okay? The Salem witch trials were a mass hysteria. Literally, people were going around accusing their friends and family members and their neighbors of being fucking witches. Like, that's a hysteria, right? And how do we know it was a hysteria? Because after they thought they got all the witches and the witch trials ended and everybody calmed down after they fucking publicly executed a bunch of young women, right? A ton of people wrote afterwards. We have the diaries of them being like, man, we went too far on this one, man. Like, this was too much. Like, we got caught up in this, right? We got caught up in it. And now that we've got hindsight, right, in the hindsight 2020, we shouldn't have done that shit. We shouldn't have done that shit. It's a fucking mass hysteria. Mass hysterias seize the populace. And that was before we had big screens blaring shit at us. Right? That was before we had billionaires with gigantic megaphones, enormous propaganda systems, fucking VR helmets that can just blitz your face with lights and sound to convince you of an illusionary reality and pretend like that illusionary reality matters more than the world you actually live in. Like, that's what's so fucked up. That's the reason I hate NFTs so much. All of our artists are focusing on making this digital art so that they can decorate a digital art space that doesn't really exist, instead of decorating reality. Instead of creating things that they can put places in reality, to make this plane of existence better. Instead of that, we got to make some digital space no one actually lives in better. Like, yikes. Yikes. Like, stuff like Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin is a fucking mass hysteria, right? And when it goes, I'll be happy to see it go, right? And everybody, when it goes, everybody is going to be like, yeah, what the fuck was that about? Oh, that was weird. We polluted how much for that? That's what fucking people are going to say. Holy shit, how much were we polluting? Like, Bitcoin alone requires the same amount of power generation as the country of Argentina. Another one called Ethereum is the country of Ireland. Like, shut the fuck up. It's a mass hysteria. Like, we've got to grow up. We've got to realize that this is a mass hysteria. And we've got to just make some fucking sacrifices. Like, sorry, dude, your big fucking truck, like your big fucking like penis gratifying truck isn't worth the survival of the species. Sorry. Find another way to convince us that your cock is actually huge, dude. They should have openly admitted that they had done it and explained what had happened and promised not to do it. It always makes me so sad to remember the Salem witch trials. Yeah, dude, but it's exactly the thing. It's exactly right. Like, it's a mass hysteria that we can get caught, and we can get caught in these mass hysterias. We are in one right now. For sure. Like, fucking for sure. Like, and we just need to all collectively, this is why I keep saying we need to stop. Like, we just need a hard stop. Right? And people will cry and whine and bitch and moan. We need, like, at this stage in the game, we need like 2-3 years of just like, take a breath, take a breather. No, you don't need that fucking little toy. No, you don't need that. No, Karen, no, Ken. No, you can't speak to the manager. Calm down. Just have a seat. Have a breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Maybe look around a little bit. You know, go take a shower, have a walk around your neighborhood, right? Just calm the fuck right down. Calm the fuck right down. I don't care. Like, I don't care. Don't go to your job. No, don't go to your job. Just don't. Right? And hey, how about the people who actually do, like, we need to transport food and all that kind of stuff. How about, instead of having a small group of people working their entire lives away for that pursuit, how about we get everybody involved in that process, right? So then everybody gets connected. Oh, how does this actually work? Hey, we need a bunch of people to go pick some apples. We'll send you out to the East Coast. Spend a summer picking apples. Come on, Karen. Come on, Ken. What are you doing, eh? Like, forget about managing that fucking boutique. Whoever gives a shit, whatever. All right, forget about that for a little while, okay? We're going to put a pause on that. Why don't you just spend a summer picking apples, right? Doesn't that sound nice? Doesn't it sound nice? Just go spend a summer picking some apples, right? Just breathe in, breathe out, connect with what's real in the world, what is tangible, what you can feel, what you can hear, what you can see, right? Put your feet on the ground. Right? Forget about this abstract concept of money, whatever the fuck that is. Right? Forget about all this kind of stuff. Right? Just take a breath. And for about 2 years, I think we as a society should just like chill. Just chill the fuck out. Chill the fuck right out. I think it would be good for us. I think it would be good for us as a people. And also I think it would be good for us to not fucking destroy ourselves with climate change related disasters. Like, real breathe in, breathe out. And we know who's perpetuating the hysteria, right? Like, Justin Trudeau's liberals are perpetuating the hysteria. For sure. For sure. Like, They are doing everything they can to convince us that they're actually doing something when they are doing the opposite. Like, you can't simultaneously stand in front of us and say, we're going to be net zero by 2050 while also ramping production up 30%. Like, get fucked. Get fucked completely. Like, it's obviously fraudulent. It's obviously a farce. It's obviously fake. Right? And the only reason he can continue doing it is because we're caught up in this hysteria where we don't know what to do, and we haven't quite realized as a people yet that, oh, it's not that we need to do anything, it's actually quite the opposite. That we need to stop. Like, just literally stop. Just don't go to work, quit your job, expect your government to feed and shelter you, right? Like, and if they don't, then abandon them. Like, is it any small wonder we're caught up and whipped up in this hysteria? We're so terrified and afraid for our own material conditions, our own like food and shelter and the future of our children and all this kind of stuff, that we have failed to recognize that we literally could all get into, like, we could surround the halls of power and just outright say, provide food, provide shelter, shut the fuck up about it. And anybody that cried about it, we literally could just spit at them. Like, these fucking psychopaths. Like, stop. Stop. It isn't actually that difficult. Right? Oh, but if, John, then we might have to, things will be colder for a minute. Like, the people who fucking came to Canada literally lived in like log cabins. Like, I don't know what needs to be said about this anymore. Like when did we become such wuss? Like when did we become such wimps? Like, our grandparents literally were shipped overseas to fight in trench warfare, to fight against Nazis and shit. They sacrificed everything. You can't do without your little toys and snackies for a fucking little period of time. Just fucking embarrassing. Like, what are you, a fucking child? Seems like. The right today is exhibiting the same mass hysteria today as the witch trials of Salem, of course, amplified by conservative media. Don't just put that on the right. Don't just put that on the right. The Democrats are exactly in the same territory, right? The left is not immune. The hysteria has overtaken the left as well, for sure. Like, the Democrats are part of it. Don't pretend like it's a right-wing issue. Like, maybe the right is a bit more on the nose, right? Because they've got the whole Christian aspect to it, so it makes it more obvious to see. But the hysteria exists within the Democratic Party and the Liberal Party and the left wing as much as it does in the right wing, right? Like, nobody's saying just chill out. Everything's about creating a new technology or making a new thing, right? Like, no, just chill the fuck out. Stop doing stuff. Meditating once a day for just 1 minute is found to be super beneficial. Of course, you're training your brain to let go of things. That's what meditation truly is, right? Like, you're training yourself to live in reality, right? And you're also training your brain to release, like, your brain can get caught on things, right? That's where anxiety comes from. Like, it goes on like a little winding, like, kind of thing. And if you don't know how to release that into the world, just like let it go, then you won't, right? But if you take a bit of time in your life and you just actively work to achieve that goal, where you sit down and you literally just, like, something comes in and you just you release it, right? I'm trying so hard not to say let it go, but it is what it is, right? And you're just constantly in this state and you're not reacting to it. You're not like standing up and going, oh, I got to write that down, or, oh, it comes in and you release it. And it comes in and you release it. Well, what that means is that when you get caught in these moments where you're being inflicted with your own thoughts, then you know what to do. And you can do so more easily, right? And it isn't about doing anything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Google Newfoundland Industries, they dumped and buried uranium in my neighborhood in the 50s. Oh man, brutal. Our Department of Defense paid Norlight to burn hazardous waste, and it was our tax money, yeah. And we had to breathe it. Ugh. Ugh. Right wing and nuance do not exist. I disagree, in fact. It's just that the nuance that exists within the right wing is a bit inscrutable. Like, I have the benefit of having been raised by right-wingers, right? And living in a very right-wing sort of society. And so there is nuance in the right wing. So I'll give you a very clear example. Let's Go Brandon, right? I've said this before, but Let's Go Brandon is like a moment where there is nuance, right? That the left has mistakenly glommed on to the idea that what they are saying is fuck Joe Biden, right? And that's the exclusive statement. Just say fuck Joe Biden. Why can't you just say fuck Joe Biden? Because Let's Go Brandon does say fuck Joe Biden, but it also reveals the hypocrisy of the media machine, right? Very clearly. Like, it's not simply saying fuck Joe Biden. It's also saying the media will overtly lie and manipulate and change the narrative directly in front of your eyes, right? That's nuance. And it's a nuance the left is missing. For sure the left is missing, right? The right is fully capable of nuance. It's fully capable of it. It's just so rooted, most of the time it's rooted in Christianity and Christian iconography, and also like the heavy sort of gaudy patriotism that we've seen a lot, that it's, and because garish is the word to use, and because it's usually so garish, you can't see anything in it, but it's just like firing at you, and you're like, like an eagle riding a jet holding a rifle, like with the American flag and a pair of sunglasses, being like, love it or leave it. Like, it's so like, what the fuck? Like, you know, that you can, and like, the far right has tons of nuance, right? The far right literally speaks in a code, right? Like the Nazi code shit that they use, like the 88, right? Like the 14, like the 14 word codes and all this kind of shit. That's fucking nuance, right? But because the left doesn't take the right's nuance seriously, or at least the center doesn't, you can never really convince people of it, right? The right is loaded with nuance. It's just that the left, like, honestly, the biggest reason why the left and the right, especially in America, can't see eye to eye is because the right has seized control of the Bible that they don't read, and the left refuses to read it. I believe this very strongly, that the common ground that will be forged, and it will be forged one way or the other, between the left and the right will arise through the reading and comprehension of the Bible. Absolutely, I believe that's the case. This sort of leftist belief that oh, the Bible is such an old document, who cares about it, it's going to go away, all that kind of stuff. No, it's not. It's not going to go away. It isn't. Whether you like it or not. Like, we still talk about Jesus Christ. It's been 2,000 years. We're still talking about that guy. Like, yeah. The common ground that the left and right will find with one another will come through the Bible. Because eventually the left is, and I see it happening. It is beginning to happen. Eventually, what will happen is that the leftists will begin to read the Bible and realize, wait a minute, this is completely different than what you guys are actually talking about. And while at the same time, right-wingers will read the Bible and also say of their own people, wait a minute, this is different than what you're talking about. And through that connection, they'll actually begin to talk to one another and perhaps begin to understand one another. Because I strongly believe that most of our disagreements are actually largely semantic. That right-wingers are walking around talking a lot about freedom, but they're not being particularly clear about freedom for what, freedom to do what, freedom for who. And they're also not particularly concerned about freedom for others. If you're concerned about freedom for yourself, but not freedom for others, then what you're talking about isn't freedom, it's selfishness. Right? And I have thought this way about the semantic misunderstandings that exist within our society since the New Atheists. Like, I strongly believe that what the New Atheists revealed was a semantic misunderstanding of what the subject matter was about. If you speak through the Bible, nobody can be blamed for what someone believes. If you speak through the Bible, nobody can be blamed for what someone believes. Speak through the Bible, nobody can be blamed for what someone believes. I don't know if I understand that ultimately, Ruth. But like people talk about the Bible as if like, well, there's like this is interpretation and there's this you could take this and twist it to mean whatever you want. It's like, yeah, if you could do that with anything, right? If you take a passage, lift it out, and then universalize it, right? Decontextualize and then universalize, you can make it say what you like, I guess. But if you actually read the thing, like, and I'm not talking like a study. Like, you don't need to like study the fucking thing. Like, literally, like, give it a cursory glance. Like, give it a quick read through. Are you saying that if all sides read the same source, then they can agree upon the same thing? I think it's very subjective material. Look at how many times it's been split. No, but anytime it's been split, it's over bullshit, right? There are very clear and obvious things that Christ said. There's very clear and obvious. And give your money to the poor, right? It is a straightforward, very clear thing. Like it's like it's amazing to me how often people get caught up on the peripheries while ignoring the core, right? Like, there are cores, like, and literally they're labeled. Like, literally they're labeled, right? Like, there's a label that says Christ's greatest commandment, right? It's right there in every version of the text ever. Christ's greatest commandment. So if you're not fucking doing that, then you're not doing Christ. Period. Like, period. It's not a debate. You can't wiggle your way out of it. Right? Literally, you've got the man you venerate and worship in the book saying, this is the thing, you guys. If what you are doing is not seen through this lens, you are not doing it. It's labeled. They might as well have put like a box around it. Like, they might as well have Jesus Christ himself like pointing at it, being like, hey, here's the thing. Here's the thing. No, and of course what I'm talking about is his great commandment is what's called the golden rule, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. Right? Like, it's right there. It's labeled. He says that it's the great commandment. Like, oh yeah, people will find any reason to argue over anything. Yeah. Which, like, there's a passage that I love to talk about. And seeing as we were talking about Peterson earlier, there's a passage in here that talks about this very thing. Also, by the way, heads up, P.S. This book is littered with like poetry and absolutely beautiful passages, such as this one. So 1 Corinthians 13. Ask yourself, does this sound like somebody you know? If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. That passage is super fucking baller, dude. Like, what a baller passage. Like, anybody come to me and tell me that that's not a baller passage, you can get fucked. Like, you can get fucked. That's some of the greatest literature that's ever been written, period, hands down, no doubt. And the idea that we're just, like, ceding this territory to obvious frauds, heretics, and charlatans. Like, yeah, Pat Robertson, he's the guy, right? He's the guy who, sure, we should just, like, completely let him have total... we shouldn't know anything about this, right? We shouldn't know a thing about this, right? We should just let the frauds have it, right? We should just let the total losers have access to it. Yeah. Like, don't read the Old Testament unless you're, like, really fucking dedicated. Like, unless you're, like, super fucking dedicated. Start at Matthew. Like, Matthew was a tax collector, okay? So when you're reading Matthew, you're reading Matthew's diary. He wrote down some of Jesus's best lectures, right? The Sermon on the Mount, right? And it reads like a diary, because it is a diary, because that's what Matthew was writing. He was writing a diary. Then you get to Mark, right? And Mark was the dude that was following Peter around. And Peter was a fisherman. He was illiterate. Became the leader of the church, because Jesus made him the leader of the church. So Mark was just the dude following Peter around. And so most of the stories are just told from Peter's perspective, right? They're obviously not first-hand accounts. They're second-hand accounts from Peter, who then Mark follows Peter around. And so the book ends up being like a kind of a loose sort of rapid-fire recollection, like campfire stories, if you think of it that way. And then you have Luke, which most of the Christians actually really like Luke. And this is what's fascinating about Luke. Luke was a historian, right? Like, straight up. Since many have undertaken to set down an orderly account of the events that have been fulfilled amongst us, just as they were handed on to us by those from the beginning were eyewitnessed and servants of the word, I too decided, after investigating everything carefully from the very first, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the truth concerning the things about which you have been instructed. He's literally been commissioned. So he just like goes into the area and is like, what's the story? And so they tell him the story. And so he writes it all down. And because he's a historian, he's actually very thorough. Right? And so the best accounts of the story actually come from Luke, who's just going into the region afterwards and being like, that's the story, this is what they told me. And he's not running from anyone, he's not under persecution, he's not afraid of anybody, he's literally been commissioned to do this, and so he does a really fucking good job. And then the whole thing ends, the Gospels end with the account told by John, who is the apostle Jesus loved. Now you can put whatever spin you want on that, but that's what it says. Is the apostle that Jesus loved, and John tells this story like it's a human fucking being, right? Like Matthew is obviously trying to tell. He just captures that Christ is a teacher, right? Mark kind of captures events in a kind of a historical context and like campfire stories. Luke is the history. John tells the story of Christ as if he was a person, which makes it really fucking interesting. Really fucking interesting to get that perspective. And then you get into Acts, which is the history of what happens to the apostles after the death of Christ. Same with Hebrews. Romans, can't forget about Romans. And then you get a bunch of letters, most of them written by Paul. And then, of course, the revelation to John. John is the only apostle who isn't executed. All of the other apostles are crucified, beheaded, boiled in oil, right? They all died for this shit. This is something I like to say about this book a lot. I don't give a shit if you think Christ was real or not. It's completely irrelevant to the story. It's completely irrelevant, right? The men who wrote this book and propagated these stories into the Roman Empire certainly existed. We have tons of evidence that they all existed, okay? They all died for it. All of them. That makes this book fucking baller, period. Like, I don't care what anybody says, right? That's fucking baller. And John is the only one who doesn't get executed. He's banished. What, to the isle? Does he say it outright in front? Anyway, he's banished to an island. And while there, he has the revelation to John, which is literally a vision of the end times. Right? Some churches, the Orthodox Church doesn't include Revelation in the text because it's wild. It's fucking wild. Like, if you read this shit out loud and put heavy metal music behind it and like animated it, it would be the coolest shit of life. It's like crazy the shit that happens in the book of Revelation. Like super, super like it's awesome. It's fucking heavy metal shit. And so anyway, that's a big long way of me saying, hey, fucking read this thing. Like, read it. Like, if you're looking for something to read, you don't know what to read, have you read this? Have you actually given it a crack open? Have you actually taken a look at it? It will surprise you. I guarantee it. Because everything you know about it is wrong. Right? That these capitalists have lied to you about everything, haven't they? Right? They've lied to you about the nature of their own society. They've lied to you about the nature of their economy. They've lied to you about how to succeed in the society. They've lied to you about China. They've lied to you about Russia. They've lied to you about the Middle East. They've lied to you about their intentions across the entire plane of existence. You think they're not lying about this? And if there's ever going to be a unification or a connection between the left and the right in America, it's going to be because of this book. For sure. For absolutely fucking sure. Because the right believes that they have the truth, and when the left reads it, they're going to be like, And because the right, like, the people on the right are good old boys, man. They're just like the Dukes of Hazzard. They're just going to ramp vehicles off shit and do all kinds of stuff. Right? And they can be convinced. They're like, oh yeah, shit. We can do better. Here's a book that tells us to do better. You just sounded like the sound effects guy for Spaceballs, Please Spaghetti. Yeah, that guy's a champion, dude. That guy's the greatest. He's amazing at that. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in these last days. The wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out. Yeah, that's James, isn't it? Fuck, James, man. He had something in his belly for sure. The Capitalist Jesus comic comes to mind now, and it's definitely making a lot more sense to me. Exactly. And there's good shit. And you know what, guys? I'm on it now. I'm on it. You guys are gonna get like a fucking mittful now. Like, where would I send you? Like, the Moses story and all that kind of stuff, like Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, like, it's very dense and not particularly... I shouldn't say that. Like, there's good shit in there, but the real good shit that exists in the Old Testament is Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Lamentations, for sure. Like, Ecclesiastes and Lamentations are brilliant books. Some of the greatest existential works that have ever been written. Like, Ecclesiastes would fit in very nicely with Nietzsche. Like, very, very, like what's it's literally all about how, like, everything we're doing is for nothing. How to enjoy our lives in spite of the inevitability of our death. Like, it's very, very powerful. And then you've got Song of Solomon, which is porn. My beloved is all radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. His eyes are like doves, beside springs of water, bathed in milk, fitly set. His cheeks are like beds of spices, yielding fragrance. His lips are lilies, distilling liquid myrrh. His arms are rounded gold, set with jewels. His body is ivory work, encrusted with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns, set upon bases of gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His speech is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. That's just a random segment of that. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built in courses. On it hang 1,000 bucklers. Your two breasts are like the two fawns, twins of a gazelle, that feed among the lilies, until the day breathes and the shadows flee. I will hasten to the mountain of myrrh and the hill of frankincense. You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Song of Solomon is a good time. Song of Solomon is a good time. And then, like, some of these stories are super crazy. Like, Ezekiel's story is nuts. Ezekiel's story is absolutely insane. Like, this is a dude who was living out in the wilderness, and God literally possesses him, according to the account. Binds to his wrists and ankles and is a head, and forces him into the city to do all kinds of outlandish, crazy stuff and prophesy to the people. And anytime they try to fuck with him, God fucks with them. It's crazy, dude. Like, and it's like, it's unabashedly insane. Like, it makes, like, if you want a book that makes God or the concept of any of this look as crazy as possible, you're reading Ezekiel, dude. Like God, like, when I finished reading Ezekiel, I was like, damn, God, you are not fucking around. Not fucking around. Perhaps we can tackle the Book of Tao as well. Yes, that's a good one too. That's a good one. Well, and what I really like about the Eastern philosophies is that they're usually fairly concise. That's, like, people really, like, lose their minds about, like, Sun Tzu's Art of War. And Sun Tzu's Art of War is, like, this big. Like, it's real consumable. And it's true about the Book of Tao and all that as well. It's usually fairly concise. And also, one of my favorite things that I learned about in Hinduism, there are, for the longest time, there were 4 Vedas, right? Which were considered the 4 ways to attain enlightenment. And there was something along the lines of, like, chanting, meditation. I'm forgetting the other 2 offhand, but like, so there were 4 passages, 4 ways to attain enlightenment. And so along came a writer, and he basically wrote a book that said, these 4 ways to find enlightenment are total bullshit. Like, the entire Veda was just about how shit it was, that these are considered the only ways to attain enlightenment. Shut the fuck up. Like, we can find enlightenment through all kinds of kind of stuff. You don't need to focus on these sorts of things. Total bullshit. I called shit. Bullshit. Right? And the Hindus, instead of, like, mounting a big thing and being like, fuck you, and, like, having a whole fucking crusade and splitting off into sects and all this kind of stuff, they took a look at his book and they went, huh, there are 5 Vedas now. And when I found that out, I was like, damn, the Hindus, they got it right. They got it right. They knew exactly how to do it. They were just like, oh, you wrote a book that's of interest. Oh, it completely trashes our whole shit. Very well. I was an atheist until my dad died on September 11th, 2011, and I got a phone call from him, from our home phone to my cell, days after, and left a voicemail. And he never called my phone once. And his TV kept turning off. I put it in my off randomly, and 2 men pistol whipped and stabbed me. Whoa. And ran when I bit the prey to my dad looking at the sky. That's an intense story, Benjamin. That's an intense, very personal story. Oh yeah, of course. No, the Eastern philosophies and religions and things like that were much better for this kind of stuff. Buddhism gets a bit wonky, the land of ghosts and all that kind of stuff. But, like, I do think that a lot of it is just storytelling. You know what I mean? Like, there's something about it that we want to tell a story about what goes on. I gotta be straight with you, man. I hope it's nothing. I just hope it's sleep. You know, I hope it's just sleepy time for me. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Mark Twain said something that really eased my mind a lot about this kind of stuff, which was, well, I didn't quite mind when I wasn't here. I don't think I'll mind when I'm gone. And I was like, oh yeah, like there's been like millions of years have passed and I wasn't here for any of that and I didn't care. You know? I don't see why I should care when I go, you know? Put it in a bit of perspective. I think now is a great time for me to, because we're heading into the end of today's show, and it'll help explain kind of a statement I make at the end of everything, which is one of the great disservices I think we do as a people is we ask a question, does God exist? I find the question is rife with semantic difficulty, right? Because usually when the atheists start talking about the subject of God, they start erecting a straw man, right? Some being that lives within the confines of the universe, akin to like a spaghetti monster, or like the old man in the clouds granting wishes to middle-aged housewives, that kind of thing. Which is great from like a personification standpoint, but like isn't actually what the theologians ever talked about. And the theologian I like to talk about the most is Isaac Newton, right? Like everybody respects Isaac Newton. He was like the creator of calculus, or the man who discovered calculus. But nobody really knows that he was also a very well-written and well-argued theologian. He wrote a great pamphlet where he talked, and it's like a 2-page pamphlet, where he talks about the nature of God, like what God must be like, or what God is. And within it, he states outright that God is the collection of all things, right? And this was uttered when Richard Dawkins had a debate with Rowan Atkinson, who at the time was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Yeah, it's not Mr. Bean. It's his same name. Haha. But he said very much the same thing to Dawkins. It's like when we're talking about God, we're not talking about a man in the clouds or some figure that exists within the confines of the universe. Quite the opposite. We're talking about a creative force that the universe is contained within, that all things are contained within, right? And if you look at Hinduism, and if you look at all the Eastern religions, right, they also have a similar way of looking at this, that there is like a fundamental oneness, that all things eventually are a singular energy, right? And well, and now even the Western scientists, right, the so-called secular scientists, are mathematically discovering, or have discovered, that at the base of all creation, right, at the base of all creation is a singular energy, right? That's quantum mechanics. So there's this singular energy that the secularists are acknowledging that seems to align pretty closely to what the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, the Abrahamic religions, as well as the Eastern religions, have been saying this whole time, right? That there's a singular energy that is the collection of all things, right? A oneness that sustains us all and creates all things, right? And now we've got these guys saying that they've proven its existence mathematically, right? And so the question to me stops being, does God exist? And the far more interesting question that I hope everybody starts contemplating quite seriously is this energy sentient? The secular scientists are saying they've proven it mathematically. The religious folks from the east to the west have all said that it's there. Okay. Is it sentient? So we tackle the question of why is this question important? Well, if it's sentient, then maybe it's a bad idea to drill holes in it. Maybe we should walk a little lighter if it's sentient or not. And then we wander into the question of, well, what's your evidence? What evidence would you have for its sentience? And this I find a touch odd, because if it is the creative force that creates us and sustains us, and that we are it and it is us, well, then it has to be at least as sentient as I am, if I consider myself sentient, because it is me and I am it. So it has to be at least as sentient as I am. So the evidence you seek is actually you and me. We are all part of what we call God. Exactly. That, and it's very easy to believe that your experience and my experience and the experience of the person beside you and the experience of the ants and the experience of the birds and all of those things are a shared collective experience. And that energy that exists perceives all of these things simultaneously and understands all of them because it is all of those things. It lives all of these lives. That you are walking around as an aspect of God itself. You are, in essence, a divine creature, a divine being, equal in your validity. This is the thing that drives me crazy about people who say, oh, well, we're not equal. Some people are quite large and some people are more capable of doing these things. And yeah, great. That's all window dressing, right? Obviously, you are not equal in your capability to an ant. Obviously. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about equality in validity. That your life and the life of the person beside you are equal in validity. Because you both were brought into this world with no permission on your half. You did not give your consent. Your creator does not need your consent. And again, you will be taken out of this reality against your consent. And once again, your creator does not need your consent. And this takes us down all kinds of crazy rabbit holes, all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And one of the things I think about all the time, there's always the question of evil, and we're all familiar with this, like why would a loving God create evil, right? And this is something where I diverge from the theologians, because they treat God as if he's like this all-knowing, all-loving, all this kind of stuff. I actually think that God doesn't really know what's going on either, right? Like, I don't think that the creative force that created us knew what it was doing when it created us. I don't think it, like, set out to be like, and then I will create this, and then I will create that. I think that the moment it attained the ability to create anything, it created everything that was logically possible to be created because it could. Period. It wasn't a moral choice. It didn't think to itself, then I will create the Holocaust. It's like none of that happened. It literally just created all things that are possible and potential to be created and then did it because it could. And it's only after these things were created that it's capable of going back and asking itself, wait, what are these things? What is good? What is evil? What is any of this? And even if it did decide that something, let's say, like the Holocaust, is too unbearable. No, this is too horrible, too horrific. Well, what could it do about it? It can't delete it. It's literally part of its memory. It's part of itself. If it did delete it, then it would immediately recreate it because it would notice, or not even notice, but it would understand that there is something missing. That you can't create a gap in God's knowledge. And if it wanted the Holocaust to stop existing, it would have to work within its own structure to prevent it in the future. so that it would only happen the once. Yeah. Well, and because the problem, DJ, is that we get caught in the illusion of separation. We get caught in the illusion of our separation from one another when we are actually one energy. We are the same thing, all of us. We are equal in our validity. We are equal in creation, right? And that's true whether or not the energy is sentient or not, incidentally, right? If the quantum energy that sustains us, if the quantum energy that we stand upon, that we know exists, right? Well, we are a singular energy, without a doubt. And any separation that exists within us is illusionary. It exists only temporarily and only in this fleeting moment. And then it is gone forevermore. Until, and when we die, we return back from the energy that spawned us. And that's just a truism, whether you like it or not. And the reason why I think this conversation is actually so important, the reason why I think this conversation is so important is that once you accept the truth of it, once you accept the truth that we live in a singular energy, sentient or not, it makes it much more difficult to hold on to your petty concerns. It makes it much more difficult to stay angry, to hold a grudge, to fight over something for things like pride or on the principle of the thing. It makes it much more difficult to stay angry or to be angry. It makes it much more difficult because you understand that these are illusions. This is an illusionary... We are illusionary forces created as an attempt by the energy to discover and articulate itself. That it doesn't know what it is. It just knows that it's here. And it's sincerely hoping that through this process of creation, that it will discover what it is and what it's doing here and what the purpose of all of this is through the voices and the conversations of its creations. And once you understand that, it makes it very, very difficult to take more petty concerns more seriously. And it makes a worship of suffering, which seems to exist and is ubiquitous in our society, a bit odd. A bit odd. Because what you're fundamentally saying is that the creative energy wants to suffer. When I would think that if I was the singular creative energy in the world, I would want to be having a good time. That the suffering is accidental and incidental. And if it could be done away with, it should be done away with. It seems to me. Anyway, I hope I didn't lose a whole bunch of subscribers for this. But this is what I believe. This is my fundamental belief. This is my linchpin. I talk a lot about how people have linchpin beliefs. The worst intellectual thinkers are the ones who attempt to obfuscate or don't even know what their linchpin is. This is my linchpin. This is the philosophy upon which all other thoughts rest. That we are a singular energy, that we live equally with one another in our validity, on a constant, persistent quest of not only discovery of ourselves, but also the discovery of the base energy that we rest upon. And as we speak with one another, we are aspects of that singular energy, talking to one another, attempting to figure things out. Because even the energy itself doesn't know what's going on. And within that process, because of the process of our births, and then the fleeting moment we're here, and then our deaths, we are equal in our validity. And if you wish to assail that position, go to it. That's my linchpin. If you can tear that down, you can tear everything else I've got down. Thanks, Major. Always looking out for me, bud. I appreciate that. You've gained 3 subs since the stream started. Well, no doubt some trolls. You've got to subscribe to troll me, right? Thanks for another great show, John. Sing your heart out. You'll make it soar. Take care of each other. And Benjamin, thank you so much for your story as well. I don't mean to glaze over what you've been writing. I'll share on Facebook and Twitter. That's very kind of you, Benjamin. I appreciate that. Please like, share, subscribe. If you've got $1, send it my way. Right? As much as I like to talk about the spiritual aspects of our lives and everything like this, motherfucker needs to eat. And we still need to do that stupid capitalist shit. Boy, I hope I'm alive for that ending, eh? Don't you hope? Don't you hope? What a pain. What a total pain. And once it's gone, everybody will just be like, what the fuck was that about? Do you think the singular energy cares? Do you think the singular energy cares about this capitalist thing? How invested do you think the singularity is? All right, guys, always remember, each and every one of you is a divine creature, a quantum being, standing in quantum energy or divine energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to ensure that you never realize it. Maybe don't let them. Revolt, rebel, repent. Good luck. We're gonna need it.